Hello, everyone. We're just waiting. I'm going to wait about 2 more minutes to let any other members and public get on, and then we'll get started.
Marissa, I noticed last night, one of the gentlemen from the committee meeting last night, it was a landlord at the office. When I went up there on Monday, it was locked.
You mean somebody was in the office last night?
I don't know how they got in. There was nobody else there. It was all alone.
Well, no, a staff member may have been here, Mike.
No, not a staff. Oh, yeah, it could have been.
Okay, looks like we have a lot of people on now, so we'll go ahead and start. Good evening. This is the City Services and Quality of Life Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Tiffany Revis, and I serve as the chair. We have 3 items on tonight's agenda. One will be hearing from the Street Vendor Project. The second, we will be hearing from the LGBTQIA plus survey and learn a little bit more about that. And then we'll be discussing the 3 precincts within our community board. And after that, we'll go into just committee business. So if we can just do attendance, we're all virtual, so go in order, whoever wants to just say it. Again, I'm Tiffany Revis.
Good evening, I'm Bruce Pachter from the LGBTQIA Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Melissa Stewart.
Will Rothschild.
Julie Chu.
Yaron Nodi Victor.
Yoden Thondon.
Robert Pagan.
Mike, you're muted.
Mike Kabak, you should see how Yaron Nodi Victor translates on my closed captioning on the bottom.
I don't want to see.
Take a screenshot. Okay, we'll get started tonight because I want to thank those that are joining us and spending and taking their time out to give us some education and speak on their organization. So first, we're going to start with the Street Vendor Project. We're joined by Mohammed. I'll let him speak really just to kind of give us an overview of the project themselves. I want to start out with saying that this isn't a debate topic. We're here to hear about the projects themselves and discuss the conditions on the grounds for the vendors. There's also been a new legislation that was just passed in December of 2025. So we'll just kind of update a little bit on that, and we can go into any more details. We can ask questions and comments afterward from the committee, and then after that, we'll take some comments and questions from the public. So again, thank you, Mohammed, for being here, and we'd love to hear what you have to share.
Of course. Thank you all for having me, and good evening. I'm Mohammed Atiyah. I'm the Managing Director of the Street Vendor Project. I'm curious if I can share my screen. I think my presentation, which I promise would be short and concise, would be more fun with some slides that I prepared for you all.
Sure.
So, yes, I have the privilege of sharing screen. That's great. So yes, again, the Street Vendor Project, we are a membership-based organization of street vendors. We have been around since 2001. The whole goal of the organization is pretty simple and straightforward, is to serve the street vendor community, to make sure we organize, we advocate, we make sure that the vendors have a voice in the city. But also along with that, providing legal representation, small business support, anything that a street vendor might need to run their business in a good way and a good manner. We provide our services and go about our work in 7 different languages, given the diversity of the street vendor population. You probably know the street vendors because you have a lot in your district, which is awesome. You know that they are the smallest businesses. They are usually immigrants, people of color, military veterans, women, and they are running the smallest businesses in our city, trying to survive and thrive in the city's challenging landscape. So I would love to go over the street vending system in a very brief way. I'll just make this, again, very concise. The street vending system is really complex, but I'll go over the very basics that folks should be aware of, and then we can take any questions if you all have any. For me, the first thing that we always want to be aware of is the different types of vendors, right? So there are 3 major types of vendors, or 3 different categories. The first one is general vendors. Those are folks who sell merchandise. The second category is what we call them the First Amendment vendors. So those are folks who sell products that are considered expressive matters, such as books, religious items, artwork, anything that is written or painted would fall under this category. The third type, of course, is the food vendors, and that's maybe the most complex. Just a quick rule of thumb for any type of vendor, just like any other business in the state of New York, they are all required to have that sales tax ID or the certificate of authority to collect sales taxes in the streets. This is not a challenging document to obtain for any small business. It's an online form. It takes a couple of weeks and people receive it in the mail. For general vendors, folks who sell merchandise, they are required to have what's called the general vendor license. Now, this license is pretty challenging because the city government has capped the number of these licenses since 1979. It was a very small number that was set back then. It was only 853 licenses. That's for the entire city. Pretty much there is no, as of today, as of now, there is no legal pathway for any person who want to sell merchandise to obtain this license. The process is you put your name on the wait list and wait for many, many years, sometimes decades, until the agency, which is DCWP, Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, calls you off the wait list and say, congratulations, today you can apply for the license, fill out this application, submit it, and now you can get a license. But if you're not on the wait list, you're not on the map. You're not going to get it in probably a century, given the status quo. The one exception that's really important here is military veterans. So military veterans have access to unlimited number of these licenses, thanks to a state law that goes back to the 1800s. It is Business Law Article 35A, if you are interested in looking that up. It goes back to 1895. That basically a law that gives the rights to military veterans to sell in the streets of New York State. So this is the one exception, but if you are not a military veteran, you have no pathway to obtain one of those licenses unless, as I mentioned, you wait for many years. First Amendment vendors, they are exempt from the license requirement. It goes back to the 90s, I think 1995, there was a case settled between a group of artists and the government of New York City that basically the court agreed to the settlement that the First Amendment vendors are not required to have licenses, only the sales tax ID, which is, again, as we mentioned, is very important document to have for any sort of business, but also very easy and accessible. So there is no licensing issue there. These are some examples of what is covered under the First Amendment, what is not. So as you can see, CDs, music, artwork, painting, drawings, books, all of that is good. But for example, if your art happens to be on a mug or a t-shirt or a bracelet, that sadly gets into the weeds and now it becomes merchandise, you cannot really sell it using that category. You will need a general vendor license. The third and most complex category is food vendors. Folks are required to have 2 documentations on them. One is a mobile food vendor license. This is a license that is issued to the individual themselves. And then there is a mobile food vending permit that goes on the cart or the truck they are selling from. The mobile food vendor license is not a problem. It's a very easy license to obtain. It takes about a month or two. You go through the health department process, you take a 2-day class, you pass the test, you get the certificate that you passed the test, and then you get this license, and you are ready to operate a food cart or a food truck. The issue is always the permit. The permit that goes on the cart, which is a sticker, it's a decal that goes on the cart that says that this unit is licensed or permitted by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to operate in the streets of New York City and sell food. The problem with that permit, again, it was capped back in the 80s, 1983. That's when New York City government decided to put a cap on the number of these permits to only 3,000 permits. And we covered briefly how to obtain a mobile food vendor license. It's a fairly easy process. The permit, what's really important to be aware of here with the permitting system is that the lack of this permit created a condition where food vendors have only two options. One option, if they want to sell in a lawful way, they will need to navigate what is known as the underground market for these permits. It's a very shady system. You have to go find someone who was lucky enough to obtain one of those unique 3,000 permits and offer them a lot of cash under the table. Usually, it's a very informal system. There is no contract, there is no MOU, none of that exists in these relationships and transactions. And the underground market, sadly, has been thriving over the last couple of decades for the lack of supply and the rise in the demand, that now the permits go for up to $25,000 for a 2-year cycle. And every 2 years, the vendor have to go and meet with this permit holder and basically beg them to renew the permit with them and offer them usually more cash to allow them to be in business and renew the permit for them. Sadly, this is about 90% of the food carts and trucks we see in the entire city. Vast majority of vendors, 90% of our membership, are basically renting permits from other people. The other option for those vendors who cannot afford dealing with this system, who cannot put together $25,000 and pay it one shot to someone in a shady system and a shady situation, they would eventually go out and take the risk and sell without a permit, right? They would have the mobile food vendor license for the most case, but they couldn't get a permit for their cart and they would be taking the risk. And the risks here are very high. You're looking at arrest, you're looking at $1,000 fine, you're looking at sometimes criminal tickets that the NYPD would write to the vendors. And for the most part, also the property confiscation. We have seen the sanitation police taking the cars and taking the wares of the vendors who don't have licenses. Something I want to clarify because it's very important in this context, which is the fact that the vendors actually want to obtain the licenses and permits, right? For decades, that has been the case, but the city government is not allowing them to do so. And we had many rallies and many events, and we walked with vendors to the licensing center in downtown Manhattan to just show the fact that the whole system is not working and the laws are not working. And you have vendors, you have people running the smallest businesses, want to obtain the proper business license, but the city says, no, sorry, the laws don't allow that. There's a new system now for food vendors, thanks to a local law that passed back in 2021. That basically created a new category of license called a supervisory license. The goal of this license is simply to eliminate the underground market. So the old permits that can be rented to other people, and people would rent the permit, take the cash, and go drive yellow cab or go do any other job or even live in a different state. All of that will eventually end in the next few years, thanks to the system of supervisory license. This license is now the new thing that has been on the market since 2022. The health department is required to release 400 of them every year, starting 2022. Of course, they had some hiccups in the implementation at the very beginning, but now they caught up with the applications. They are sending those applications to food vendors. And the good thing about the supervisory license is that it requires the holder of this license to be present at the food cart or the food truck all the time. So if I have a supervisory license, I can obtain a permit for my food vending unit, but I cannot rent it to my friend or my cousin, take the cash and go do something else. I can no longer do that. Vending in parks is really interesting. I know that your district touches on Central Park. You got Central Park South, so I think it's important to also draw the distinction here. I think the same thing for Bryant Park and other parks. The parks pretty much have very different system. Whatever exists outside the citywide permit and the supervisory license, none of that applies. Pretty much the parks designate vending locations and locations where they wanna rent out to vendors, and there is an RFB. It's a bidding process. They send the request for bids and ask interested vendors to apply. Usually the process is pretty tedious and pretty complicated. It's not a simple, easy process. It's a whole application. You gotta submit a business plan and insurance policy for $1 million, and even like the blueprint and the graph of your cart, your menu, your prices. It's a very challenging process that we have helped a couple of vendors before apply for it, and it seems to be really difficult and challenging. You probably also know that the top locations, the busiest ones in Central Park, go usually for hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent every year, which is, in a way, not the traditional street vending that we all know. Another aspect of this to also be aware of is the disabled veteran vendors. Again, the veterans, thanks to this super old law in the 1800s, again, gives them the right to work and sell in the streets of New York State. So again, there was a big dispute between a group of veteran vendors and the city government, and the veterans sued the city, and they actually settled the case back in 2014, creating this special permit. It's called Specialized Vendor Permit, that allows the disabled military veterans to sell food on the sidewalk surrounding city parks. The rules here are pretty straightforward. You cannot use this permit inside the park. You have to be on the sidewalk surrounding the park, but also you cannot be across the street. For example, if a military veteran want to take their cart and work in the middle of Times Square, they sadly cannot do that. Siting rules. A very important piece of the puzzle is where can you vend? A lot of people are under the impression that once you have a permit and a license, you can be anywhere you want. Sadly, that's not the case. I personally was a vendor in Times Square. So that's in your district. I probably sold you a hot dog if you ever been there. But I do know that finding a legal vending location is a real challenge, right? It's a really challenging process. So many rules, I don't want to get into them, but I want to give you the tip of the iceberg just to be aware of what the vendors are dealing here with. The first rule is the width of the sidewalk. The first rule in the admin code requires vendors to operate on a sidewalk that is 12 feet wide or wider. So any sidewalk that's narrower than that is simply off limits. And when we look at the data of New York City sidewalks, sadly, that's more than 80%. So more than 80% of the public sidewalks in New York City are narrower than 12 feet wide. That makes them by default off limits to street vendors. So now we have 20% left. And with those 20%, you have to apply so many other rules. The restricted streets. So many streets across Manhattan, across the 5 boroughs, are off limits for vendors for various reasons. You want to make sure that your block is not listed in those restricted streets. You also want to make sure that you don't operate on a bus stop, on a taxi stand, on a no standing zone adjacent to a hospital. You have to be 10 feet away from the crosswalk, 20 feet away from the building entrance, 18 inches from the curb. So many rules and regulations that basically limit the existing legal vending location. The general vendor setup is also important to know. I cannot bring my 50-foot long table if I want to sell merchandise. The maximum size I'm allowed to have is 8x3, and things have to be on a table, so they cannot be on the ground. That's also important. So this is pretty much a graph that shows the length and width of the table, and even the height. The height cannot exceed 5 feet. Fines, which is pretty much a very sad story. As we all know, vendors are subject to a lot of enforcement by various enforcement agencies. You can name them all, right? It's sanitation police that now houses the Office of Street Vendor Enforcement. It's the NYPD in most cases, pretty much all over Manhattan. We're seeing, especially in the Midtown area, a lot of cops on foot pretty much target the vendors and make them a priority, which is really sad. The health department, the parks department, the fire department when it's needed, DEP, you name it, all these violations are handed to the vendors. And this is a range of how much it would cost. Usually, the sidewalk placement violations, which is the smallest fine a vendor can receive, starts from $25 and it goes up to $500. But if a vendor doesn't have the proper license or permit, that can go for up to $1,000 fine. So the street vendor reform and what Tiffany shared about the bills that just passed in December and what those bills are, pretty much the street vendor project, along with other organizations, you can see them all here, the steering committee, our partners in this mission, came up with this platform that we call the street vendor reform. And this platform was basically aiming to one thing and one thing only. We wanted to fix the street vending system once and for all. The system is not working for anyone. It's not working for the vendors. It's not working for the brick and mortar community. It's not working for the real estate. It's not even working for the public. Even the customers who buy from the vendors every day are not happy with the status quo given how outdated the system is. So we came with this platform that basically includes several bills. And the first bill, which is, I want to get out of the way because now it's old news, relatively old news, is repealing the criminal liability. As I mentioned, the NYPD gets involved in a heavily way, and sadly, they will target the street vendors or write them tickets. The sad truth is that the admin code is written in a way that allows the NYPD to write civil tickets or criminal tickets to any street vendor for vast majority of the rules. So this bill basically reduce this criminal liability, make sure that the misdemeanor charge is removed completely from all vending violations, and also remove the criminal liability for all citing rules and administrative code violations, except for the license requirement. So now, in theory, when this law being implemented, the NYPD can no longer write criminal tickets to vendors. And just to give you an example of what that is, because I received a lot of these criminal tickets. I was working, as I said, in Times Square, so I would interact with a lot of police officers. And a vendor would receive a ticket for not wearing their mobile food vendor license around their neck. If they forgot it in the back pocket, I would go to criminal court for that. I actually went to criminal court for being a few inches closer to the crosswalk than I'm supposed to be. I was 9.5 feet away from the crosswalk, not 10. Those 6 inches sent me to criminal court, and I spent the whole day to see a judge for the judge to decide if they want to dismiss the case or get me to do a class or community service or whatnot. Thankfully, this bill already passed. It was called Intro 47. Now it is local law 122 for the year 2025. It passed back in June. Eric Adams, the former mayor, vetoed the bill, and the council overrode the veto on September 10th. And this law should be implemented within 180 days. So by March 9th of this year, hopefully we will see no more criminal tickets for street vendors. The second piece, which is really important, that's the core of the whole issue. As I mentioned, the dilemma with the licenses and permits and all of that. The bill is called Intro 431. And Intro 431 is sponsored by Council Members Sanchez and Farias from the Bronx. It would basically create additional licenses for both categories, food vendors and merchandise vendors. And I'm sorry if the information here is not super accurate. Actually, the bill got changed. That was the original language. 431B, the updated version of the legislation, actually includes the following, not what's written here. It includes 10,500 new licenses for merchandise vendors, and it includes 11,000 supervisory licenses for the food vendors. But it removed, actually, the most recent version of the bill removed completely this clause that would have made it unlimited after the 5 years. So we're looking at 20,000 plus licenses for both categories of vendors merchandise, and food to make sure we're bringing all the vendors into compliance, making sure we end the underground market, and making sure vendors have access to the business license. The other bill is Intro 408. It's a very important legislation sponsored by the public advocate Jumaane Williams. It basically creates a division for street vendor assistance under SBS, because we know SBS is an amazing agency, but they haven't really created enough services for the vendors. And the very last piece I want to mention here is some myth and facts around street vendor reform. I'll go over this real quick, but maybe I touched on them briefly as I was going. The first myth that a lot of folks have, which is a big misconception, that vendors don't have any rules to follow. And as I mentioned to you all, there are so many rules where vendors have to follow them, especially when it gets to the siting and where vendors can and cannot be. For your district in particular, I don't know if you heard of the Midtown Core restriction, but I think it's important to know that vast majority of the Midtown area is off limits for merchandise vendors. The exception here is a very small category of military veterans who have access to a very special license called the Blue License that they can only operate in this Midtown Core. And the Midtown Core stretches from 29th Street all the way to 65th Street, from 2nd Avenue to 9th Avenue. So you can imagine, draw this triangle in your head on the map. That's a huge area of where the money's at, where people can actually make a living. All of that is off limit to the merchandise vendor, sadly. And so many other streets are also off limits to food vendors, along with all the other siting rules. The other thing is that a lot of folks, and we hear them talking about this in different spaces, that vendors don't pay taxes and they don't have fees, they don't have overhead, they just operate for free, and it's creating unfair competition to the brick and mortar counterparts, which is also another misconception that people are not aware of. Vendors collect sales taxes just like any other business, and they pay them. They pay the business tax, the personal taxes. They do hire people, so there's always the salaries and W-2s and all of that that exist. They are required to provide workers' compensation and disability insurance. The licensing and permitting, there are always fees attached. They even pay rent to the garages and commissaries where they park and use. Pretty much every business expense you can think of, the vendors would have, but of course on a different scale, given how small their business is. Yeah, and I think we talked briefly about the competition here, but also the vendor steal business from the brick and mortar. We hear that from several business groups, and we have seen in many studies in different neighborhoods that actually the vendors and the storefronts work so well together, and they have a very positive relationship. And even the irony here that came about the green card program back in the day, it was a tremendous case study back in 2008 when the Bloomberg administration decided to create the green card program. A lot of supermarkets and bodega groups came out against that, claiming that if the green card program was created and vendors are allowed to sell fresh produce in some neighborhoods, their businesses will go down. And then years later, a study was conducted to actually find that people are buying more fresh produce from the bodegas and from the supermarkets in these neighborhoods where the green card program was actually implemented. The very last myth I want to go over is that having more licenses will open the floodgates. I think this is very common. And again, a lot of folks are not aware of some facts that more than 23,000 vendors are already operating in our city. And vast majority of them, 75% of the food vendors, are operating without the proper permit, which makes them unpermitted business or unlicensed business. 37% of merchandise vendors also operate without the general vendor license that we talked about. So creating those new licenses is only bringing the operating vendors into compliance, taking them out of the shadows and bringing them into the system where the city government can actually enforce the law and make sure businesses are in compliance. I think we talked enough about these myths and facts, but I want to pause and see if people have any questions for me about the bills, about the reform, or about the vending system itself.
Just, I have one question to start. What did you say is the time like line again? Is there, you said it used to be years and then you heard you say something about 5 years. What is the licensing time and when does it have to be renewed and what's that requirement look like now with the new laws?
Sure. And sorry if I went through this quickly. So the legislative process, as you mentioned, Tiffany, last year, we got 3 bills to the finish line in December in the very last stated meeting. Those bills are Intro 431 that will create the new
Mhm.
licenses, 408 that will create the services under SBS, and also Intro 1251 that will require the licensing agencies to release the license applications quickly. Again, as expected, those bills were vetoed by the former mayor again on the very last minute. And what we're looking at right now is this current city council will override this veto. They're gonna bring it to a vote again tomorrow. Actually, we're so lucky that we're discussing this in this moment. And hopefully tomorrow the council will pass the bills again and they will become laws. For both categories of vendors, the timeline will look like this. Starting July of this year, the health department will create 2,000 new supervisory licenses, pushing those 2,000 supervisory licenses into the system, into the waiting list, hopefully to clear it up. And they're gonna continue adding 2,000 new licenses for food vendors over the next 5 years. So by 2031, we're looking at 10,000 additional supervisory licenses into the system. After that, that's going to be the new cap. For the merchandise vendors, DCWP is required to spend 2026 creating a whole new waiting list because the waiting list they have right now is outdated. It goes back to 2016, and they will be releasing 10,500 new applications for general vendor licenses starting January 15th of next year. How exactly the timeline will look like, I don't imagine them sending 10,500 letters all at once, but I hope that they're going to come up with a streamlined process to ensure that the vendors have access to these licenses in a timely manner.
Okay, no, thank you for going over that. David, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for coming and talking through this with us. I have 2 questions. And sorry if you did say this earlier and I just didn't hear it. So there's roughly how many food vendors are in New York City right now?
Roughly 20,500.
20,500. And so the expectation is over the next 5 years that will increase to 30,000?
No. So the expectation is that, actually, let's take it a step back. A step back, within the 20,500 food vendors that are operating right now, 75% of them don't have permits. They only have a food vendor license, which is one piece of what's required of them. The permit that goes on the cart on the truck, they don't have, which means they are now operating without it, and the city agencies consider them unlicensed business. And they go after them, they hand them a $1,000 fine, and they confiscate their carts and their food. What this bill will do is actually create supervisory licenses so those vendors can actually receive the license, get the permit for their cart, and start operating their business in a lawful way. Within the 25% of carts and trucks that have permits on them, 90% of them are dealing with an underground market. They are renting a permit that is owned by somebody else who's probably driving a yellow cab or whatnot. And those folks will get the opportunity to get their own supervisory license and permit and give away
Okay.
that.
So you said there's 20,000 food trucks today. 75% of them are not lawful.
I'm sorry, it's not trucks, it's vendors. I just want to draw that distinction because vast majority of vendors who don't have permits don't have official trucks.
Okay.
It's very rare.
I'm just trying to understand. So today, the legal vendors are roughly 5,000?
That's right, between 5,000 to 6,000.
Okay. So 5,000, and then we think that there's 15,000 unlicensed vendors.
Yep.
And the bill that was passed will allow for how many more?
10,000 more.
So theoretically that 5,000 should go you said, I'm sorry, you said 10,000 more, so 15,000, right? And then on a
Yes.
going forward basis, you guys are asking for how many more permits?
Well, this is the number the bill is creating. We're not asking for more of that.
Got you. And then I guess my last question, sorry, I had more than two questions. Is there any consideration paid to the city for the real estate space?
In what way?
Like, I mean, when we do dining out for the restaurants, there's a rental for the real estate. Is there a rental of the real estate that these food trucks are on?
Yeah, that's interesting. So the food carts and food trucks operate in the public space, right? They don't operate in a private area. That's different from selling in a market or a private market or whatnot. But what the vendors pay is the fees that goes to the city, the taxes,
What-
all of that for any other business. But
Yeah,
the
that's
rent
not what he's
goes.
saying.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
but the rent.
So the answer is no, there's no rent per se for the food trucks.
That's correct. They don't pay rent to the city for the location they operate in. If
Okay.
that's your question.
And so my understanding is our Dine Out program, if for folks to take outside use of parking spaces, there's rent that is transacted to the city.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Of course.
They pay
Thank you.
taxes, right?
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying from it. Yaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, thank you. Thank you for coming. This is interesting. I wanted to ask about the intersection between I wanted to ask your thoughts about dining out and outdoor dining and the intersection between street vending and outside dining. For instance, are food vendors should food vendors, would it be your assertion that should food vendors be allowed to apply for spots or have room in the roadbed as opposed to on the sidewalk if we're allowing restaurants to do that, for instance? Like what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is that we have tried to engage with DOT back in the day during COVID, and thanks to the Times Square Alliance, they came and said, we have this brilliant idea. Now we're allowing everyone to use the parking space. Let us use them. Let us get the vendors off the sidewalk and create some spaces in the parking spots. And DOT blasted at us. They said, no way. We can allow the vendors to be on the roadway. This is a big liability. And they just shut down the whole idea. Although we have told them that using the same concept, you can create space in the parking lane for the vendors. That will also allow for more space on the sidewalk for pedestrians and everything else. But they were not open to have this conversation. Excuse me. I think it's an interesting idea to explore this year or next year in the future to just see how we can utilize the public space in a better way.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yorin, go ahead.
Hi,
There you go.
sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand.
It's okay.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I learned a lot. There's a lot of information. I have a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that this local that was in 21 on the supervisory licenses, that it was going to provide for 445 of them issued every year for 10 years, which would create 4,450. And then you mentioned that, you know, this new legislation would be creating, I can't
2,000.
remember. How many?
2,000 every year.
Is that in addition to
No.
the 4,000? No.
So,
Oh,
the,
so it
the
would
2,000
this
number
would-
is instead of the 400.
So 2,000 every year of supervisory licenses? Okay,
Yes.
so
For the next 5 years only.
okay, so my question is, if there are currently 23,000 operating vendors, I think you said. What
Mhm.
is the capacity of a city to actually, this number of vendors? Like, I'm sure there have been studies done on, what we can actually manage. And then my second question of just following on David's question about, what income the city gets apart from, the tax and how much do the vendors pay for these per license?
I think I got the question, but you were cutting off for me a bit. I don't know if it's my
Oh,
network.
okay. I just wanted to know how much it costs for a permit or a license. They're
Sure.
generally for 2 years, right? 2-year
Yes.
terms? Okay.
Yeah, so let me break it down quickly. So the fees are for the mobile food vendor license, it costs about $100 to obtain. And then for the supervisory license, which is now the new permit, the new important document to have, it costs $438 and it's renewed every 2 years. And then for the permit, the sticker that goes on the cart, that costs $200. So this is for food vendors. For merchandise vendors, I think the fee is between $100 to $200. I'm not so sure, but it's renewed every 2 years as well. In terms of the study of how many vendors can operate in the city, you will be surprised that there is no study throughout the history that looked into that. Even back in the 70s and 80s, when the government was coming up with all these laws, there was no study. There was nothing but constant attack by big businesses, by big real estate, like openly racist conversations happening about vendors to influence these decisions and cap those permits. But I'll give you one figure to look into and study and consider. Back in 1983, when the city government put the cap to only 3,000 food vendor licenses, food vendor permits, there were 12,000 food vendor permits operating at that time. They got rid of 9,000 overnight. So that just gives you a sense of what happened back in 1983. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. Listen, that was a terrific presentation,
Thank you.
Mohammed. I learned a lot. I see vendors, I operate in Midtown in the Garment District, Times Square, Madison Square, and I'm inundated with the number of mobile carts that I see every day. I just want to double check. Vendors pay taxes and fees. So it's not like they got a free ride. They are paying taxes and fees, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the one thing, and the locations are here you can go, but here you can't. But when you go here, you can't be over this wide or over this high or over this far from the curb, 18 inches. And there has to be a certain amount of space between the building line or unobstructed for traffic to walk through and all of that. So I have no problem with any of everything that you mentioned, as long as it's law abiding. The thing that I am most troubled with is the fact that a lot of these, or some of these mobile vendors don't stay in the prescribed area. They got a license, they got a permit, they got everything that they need, or they're a veteran, but they're going on the corner next to an obstruction, a tree, so that there's not 12 feet of clear space and that kind of thing. What can the organization such as yours, which has some kind of an in with these people, impress upon them the importance of get your license, get these extra 2,000 every year for the next 5 years, but obey the laws. Don't go near the corner. Don't antagonize people. How can you help to make these people more law-abiding?
Of course. Thank you so much for the question. And the answer is that this is pretty much what we have been doing since the inception of the Street Vendor Project. Since 2001, what we do is go out in the streets every day, educate the vendors, share resources. Even at some point, I think it was about 15 years ago, we created a guide with visuals. Some of the visuals that I showed you right now explaining the citing rules, because the admin code is really harsh. It's really difficult to read. It's a lot of legalese. It takes a lot of lawyers to put their heads together to really decipher what that means in reality. So we do a lot of that every day. But one of the biggest challenges we have seen with a lot of the vendors is that there is sometimes no incentive for them to follow all these strict rules when they don't have ownership of the business. Because again, the underground market is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? In one way, it allows the business as an entity to be legal, to look licensed, so we're good. But the vendor themselves, they don't really care much about the permit being in good standing. So we see a lot of vendors who just rent a permit and say, I'm only here for a couple of years. I want to make as much money as I can. I don't care how many tickets are lined up on that permit. And that in a way gets back to your point. How can you create an incentive for the vendors to be in compliance when you give them the license and permit under the name? And they know that if they misbehave after certain number of violations, that's also mentioned in the bill, by the way, if they get 3 violations in 1 year, the city can suspend their license or their permit. They will be out of business for a month. And if they do that again, they will be suspended for 2 months. And if they do it for the 3rd time, the permits and license are revoked forever. And they can no longer deal with the agency. So there is always the big education campaign that we are launching this year, by the way. Starting March, we're going to be on the ground every day, educating the vendors, sharing resources, telling them how to be in compliance with all the citing rules. But also the city has to do its part by creating those resources in SBS. SBS is a great agency, but again, vendors are not online all the time. They are not on emails and newsletters. They don't check what's happening on social media to go look for a course or a training. We have to be out there educating the vendors, and then the enforcement will address certain bad apples who pretty much intentionally break the law. I hope that answers your question.
That was great. Thank you. Will, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mohammed. This has been a great presentation, and generally seems like a really great idea just to bring these people back into legal compliance. So the concerns that I have is just, is like, I'm trying to think through, is there a situation where this incentivizes more street vendors to go into business, and then we have a situation where, I'm just thinking about space on the sidewalk and congestion, things like that. So is there any situation?
I think we lost you, Will.
Will, we can't hear you.
Will is frozen. We
Hi,
can
Will,
hear
you're
most
back.
of that, Will.
Okay, my internet's not great. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we hear
we
you
can.
now.
Okay, did you get my question?
I got most of it.
Half of it.
I can guess the rest. If
Is
I
there
know.
any situation that you see this incentivizing more food trucks to start businesses, so becomes cheaper to get a permit, but causing more congestion on the sidewalks, etc.?
So there are a couple of components here, and it's a brilliant question. So thank you for it, Will. I think the first thing is really understanding how Department of Health operates with the rollout of the new licenses, the supervisory licenses. Their priority system is very simple. They go with the order of your mobile food vendor license. Remember this license I shared that any vendor can obtain? How old your license is would determine where you are on the waiting list. So if my license is pretty much 17 years old as I've been here in the city, and I'm somewhere on the waiting list, my number is 3,300. So if anyone who's coming after me, they will be at the bottom of the waiting list, and the order will go from the top to the bottom. So folks who have been operating for longer, they will have the priority to receive this license. The situation you're mentioning it might happen after the 5-year mark, when all the operating vendors get a chance to obtain the supervisory license and permits and formalize their business. And there is still more new folks, newcomers might come and be able to obtain these licenses. But even then, let us say tomorrow or in 2031, 10,000 new cars and new trucks are operating in the city. There are only so many legal vending locations where vendors can operate in. So it doesn't really matter how many cars and trucks are out there. As long as people are following the laws, you will end up having a very small number of carts in every given block. And you have so many like blocks and stretches in New York City that are off limits just because of one tiny rule of the sighting rules. I don't know if 9th Avenue is in your district, but 9th Avenue in Midtown is virtually impossible for vendors. Although it's a thriving commercial corridor, it's lovely, it's beautiful. I would love to have a cart there, but between 42nd Street all the way to 59th, you can only count 2 or 3 carts. The reason being the sidewalk is not wide enough. You have so many storefronts and entrances all over. It is impossible. Like the laws of physics will get in the way of me putting a cart and be in compliance of all these rules. And we heard this argument back in the day. We started this conversation, by the way, 12 years ago. In 2014, we said, city government, please lift the caps. And I remember very well, a lot of people, including some council members who represented your area, were like, oh my God, if we open the floodgates, there will be 1,000 vendors in Times Square. And I was like, wait a second. How would you fit 1,000 vendors in Times Square? It's impossible. Even if those people want to come, there are 3,000 food vending permits since the 80s. Why we don't have 1,000 food carts in Times Square? The reason being is that you cannot be in compliance with 1,000 carts. There is only a small number of carts and trucks and vendors tables that can actually fit there. And also there is the economic component of it, right? Like how many businesses can thrive in one corner, pretty much selling the same products. So all of that would play into how the sidewalks would look like. But as long as people are following the sighting rules, the number of licenses won't really matter. I hope that makes sense.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else from the committee have any questions or comments before I see if the public? Okay, so I'll go to the public now. Mauro, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I am Mario Messina from the Rose Hill Initiative. And Mohammed, thank you very much for the presentation. But most important, I want to thank you for the work that you guys are doing to help the vendors understand the rules and regulations and try to comply with those. Now, I've heard a bunch of numbers here, and it looked like a 3-month game, you know, because one moment we are dealing with the 45,000 licenses, another moment is only 30,000 licenses, and so on and so forth. One thing that scares me the most is the fact that somehow there is no study about the density of this city and the number of licenses and cards and vendors that can be absorbed in the lawful places where they are allowed to operate. Now, consider the fact that we also have newsstands that they are growing like mushrooms every day, and they are taking away space on the sidewalks. Then you have the restaurant cafes that summer, winter, whatever, they still have tables out there. If we continue in this way without having a study, without having some sort of cap on all of this, we're going to end up not being able to get out of the house. Because already right now in some spots, because of the number of carts of the vendors, because of the street sidewalk cafes, and because of the other things and the food, traffic that there is impossible to walk through. So I urge this committee to please consider asking the controller of the city to run a piece of research about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Mohammed, did you want to say
Yeah,
anything?
I can just share a quick reflection and thank you for the question. I think it's very important to have a study, and we have been pushing the city to do a study for many years, and folks sadly have been dragging their feet. But here is the one thing I want to share, just to be honest from my perspective. I don't see the number of licenses or number of permits to be the problem. I see compliance to be the one and only key factor that will make sure public safety is considered across the board, and you have access to your sidewalk and your public space. Say, if we say, put a very low cap on the number of permits and licenses. If there are only 500 vendors in the entire city, and all of them come to the same neighborhood and break all the laws, this neighborhood will be hell. You will not be able to walk in the streets and sidewalks. So the number of
No,
licenses don't really matter. It's
I
compliance.
apologize, but I don't agree with your assessment. Because if you have a correct number of people that, thanks to the work that your agency does, are running their business lawfully, I don't have any problems. And there are no problems out there. What I am afraid is that the amount of licenses and the amount of density that is being created between the various segments that are populating our sidewalks are going to make some areas of the city very difficult to manage, to negotiate, So that's all I'm saying. And again, we are here to help. If you want the push from our side to push the controller to try to do a study like we did with the controller about the study that they did about the number of shelters around the city, we'd be more than happy to do that. Tiffany, you know how to reach me. So
Yeah.
actually what we can do is set up a working group to do that.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk more about that
Yeah.
offline. Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Anybody else from the committee? Any other questions, comments for Mohammed?
Mario Messina, please.
Mike, what?
Who is Mario Messina? Is he on the board?
Yes,
You wanna
No,
what?
he's okay. He's a member of the public, but he's part of the Rose Hill Initiative. He's speaking. He's on the public. I went to the public comment.
Thank you.
And we're working with him on other components within our committee. Thank you. Well, Mohammed, thank you so much for coming. I think we all became very educated tonight. I know I did. I tried to do my research before when I knew you were coming prior, and then after the law passed last month. And all this has been very helpful. If us as a community board could help in any way, we're always happy to help the safety and quality of life in our district, and that's what this committee is for. I would also just say I urge anybody just to contact our board office if there's anything within our district that there's a concern about compliance, and maybe that's one way that we can continue to help navigate having legitimate licenses and abiding by the rules that have been set forth too. So again, we thank you for your time, and please let us know how we can continue to help in the future.
Of course. Thank you all so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You have my contact. Always happy to support and share thoughts and comments and answer any questions. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much. You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next up on our agenda, and thanks for sitting through our first speaker. This is always hard to predict when to let the second person know when they can come on. So I believe we are joined by Bruce and Chris, both to speak about the LGBTQIA plus survey that's going to be put out. They are members of the advisory committee to the New York City Police Commissioner. And thank you for being here tonight. And I'm actually just going to turn it over to whichever one of you wants to speak, and we'll go
I'm
from
gonna
there.
start. Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. I have the distinct pleasure of actually serving as the commissioner's chair of the committee. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of things that are going to be happening that New York City will finally have its own LGBT public safety survey. It's never been done before. And when we sat down with the commissioner last year, she looked at me with like, why? And I said, Commissioner, I wish I knew the answer. In light of what's going on federally, we want to protect our community as best as we can. And we want to be able to have a baseline to go to the commissioner and say, these are the issues that we have. These are the issues that we see that can be addressed, and we can have results quickly. This committee was established in 1989 under Ed Koch, and it lay dormant, was reconstituted in 2009 under Bloomberg. It kind of had its ups and downs. And when Mayor Adams came in and Commissioner Kaman was appointed, we started to get a lot of support from the 14th floor of 1PP. And when we approached the commissioner in March, Dr. Chevalier and I and the committee worked on developing a centric survey, and we are going to every community board within our borough, within our city. I spoke to Borough President Horman about his assistance, and we want you to help us, because in theory, we're helping our own community, and we'll be helping those that actually don't have the means. I think we're the only committee or organization that deals in policing that has a direct voice to the police commissioner. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chevalier, who developed the survey, and then we'll take questions if anyone has any. Chris.
Well, thank you, Bruce, for the introduction, and thank you all for having us tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and appreciate your time. So just a little background about the survey. It has 3 parts to it. First is collecting demographic information. And so we're going to hope with the survey to be able to do intersectional analysis, understand how different parts of our community, have different lived experiences. So there will be a number of things regarding like race, gender, sexual orientation, as well as things such as living with a chronic illness, living with a disability, for example. Then the second part of the survey is going to be more about community safety broadly. So talking about things such as harassment, experiences with bias crimes, perceptions of safety in neighborhoods and work environments. And then the third final part is about experiences and perceptions of the NYPD, and trying to understand kind of frequency of contact, how the forms of contact have occurred, and how they might shape the perceptions and willingness to, say, report crimes in the future if someone is a victim. And the survey, why we're doing it, and this background is or rather just kind of the approach we're taking is complete neutrality. We don't have an angle. We don't know what's out there. And, that's very concerning in a way. There have been some great national studies, but again, they're national studies, done by ACLU or the Williams Institute or Lambda Legal. But those results in aggregate don't give us the information we need to understand the efficacy of kind of NYPD initiatives, understand, if there's lapses in training or accountability. And again, though, some things might be going well. Some precincts might be leading the way, and so what we're trying to do is kind of find ways to support what's working, identify areas of concern, and also give community members a voice that will make its way to the highest echelons of NYPD. The survey is open to all LGBTQ adults that either live, work, or study in the 5 boroughs. It's designed to be 5 to 8 minutes long to take, and it's completely anonymous. We don't track IP addresses, no digital fingerprints, and once the survey is, when the collection period is over, we're gonna do a lot of work to make sure that no PII or any identifying information or anything that might lead to a person's identity being revealed. We're going to be combing through the results to make sure that's all redacted, and that that anonymity remains even through the analysis. We're very much into kind of informed consent, so the survey starts with introduction of who's going to be holding the data, what it's going to be used for, our contact information, and the submissions only get tracked if the person hits the submit button. We don't track partial answers, so if people have any issues with any questions or they can pull out. It's also a trauma-informed survey, so we have resources in the beginning and the end in case anyone remembers something, experiences emotional discomfort. And some other things we've are trying to do again is transparency. So after we deliver a executive brief to the police commissioner, we're going to do a long form analysis of all the results and make those results available to the public. And so at the end of the survey, in a separate mini survey, we collect email addresses, and if anyone's interested in receiving the results directly, we'll give that out to them. But otherwise, we'll be publishing things on websites, through social media, in addition to a long form research product, smaller digestible policy briefs for lawmakers, stakeholders, and then more digestible infographics for just to get people interested in the results. And so another thing just to add, this is a effort of many, in addition to the, working with the advisory committee. We are partnering with a variety of different community boards, but also grassroots LGBTQ organizations that will help disseminate the survey, but they also helped us design it. So we tried to reach a variety of groups that, some of whom, part of their advocacy has been, to be critical of the criminal justice system. And we invited and incorporated their feedback. So, we tried to make this, as inclusive of a process from beginning to end as possible.
Chris, if you will allow me, one thing I wanted to add, and sorry to interrupt you, Chris. We are made up of the community. No one on this committee who has a voice on the committee is part of the NYPD. We're the only advisory committee within, quote, advisory to the police commissioner that is not under their authority. So when we did the survey, if there was a question that they thought they wouldn't like the results, they couldn't say to us, you have to eliminate this question. So we run totally autonomous. We are very grateful that through our work, that this committee is now being memorialized in what's known as the Code of Conduct, which is the Bible of the NYPD, which the commissioner said to us last year, you've done so much hard work. We need you to be acknowledged by us for the work that you do. So we are the community, but we're not law enforcement. We're outsiders that care. We don't take a salary. We get no compensation whatsoever. Everything that we spend to produce collateral swag comes out of our own pockets. And the reason why we like it, because we can do what we have to do. As it's called, we advise the commissioner. And we're very fortunate that the highest ranking civilian within the NYPD, Ryan Marola, is her chief of staff, who is considered a 3-star chief, is a member of the LGBT community. So we have allies in 1PP. Sorry to take that time away from you, Chris.
No, not at all. And just to build off of what Bruce said, you know, I think this is a really great opportunity right now. You know, we have an ally in the police commissioner. We have ally with the chief of staff. We have great members of the Gay Officers Action League who are, you know, helping support this survey. We have a pro LGBTQ mayor. And we're standing up, you know, as Bruce mentioned, with a lot of the chaos that's going on at the federal level. And I think doing this survey now and helping people know that, you know, there are voices out there that really want to help build bridges between law enforcement and the community. I think this is a great junction in history to do some good. In some ways, it's both the hardest time to do this survey and the best time. But it needs to be done. And with that, I'll just say, you know, very appreciative of your time. Happy to drop the link to the survey in the chat if you're interested in taking a look. And if you are a member of the community and want to share your voice, please feel free to. We're releasing right now, we have the English language version of the survey with Spanish and Chinese to follow soon. So if you're interested in taking the survey in one of those 2 languages, alternatively, feel free to email us. Our contact information is embedded in the beginning of the survey, and once that's complete, we'll make sure to get that to you. But we're happy to take your questions, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Bruce, both. I'm going to start with a few questions, and hopefully this will answer some of the other questions we might all be having. When is this survey beginning? When has it already begun? Like, when is it ending? Where do people find the survey? I'll start with those.
I'm going to let Chris handle that since he is the creator.
Sure thing. Well, thank you. So we are doing kind of a soft launch right now, you know, just to make sure that there's we've done a lot of double checking. This is our triple check, just making sure that people with different technology, technological devices, whether different types of computers, cell phones, and whatnot, make sure there's no technical issues with getting, access to the survey and completing it, making sure that it's, accessible. For example, if people have trouble reading it or whatnot, then we'll make some adjustments to the font. So we have our soft launch right now. Earlier this week, we got approval from a ethical review board to begin the outreach. So we're beginning that, but hopefully later next week, we're going to start emailing our partners with kind of collateral kits. So like posters and flyers and other materials to help them disseminate the survey, as well as boilerplate text in case people want to put it in their emails. So you please expect members of the community board here to please expect that email next week. So it's soft launch now, but kind of hopefully like the full on launch next week or the middle of February at the latest. And you hopefully see it across social media too through some of our grassroots partners.
And how long are you planning to do the survey and collect data before you present it? What's that look like? So
the goal is to keep the collection period open for about a month. We're doing it for a month just to make sure that people don't accidentally, take the survey multiple times. And then also that helps us kind of avoid any kind of like trolls or bad actors from say like targeting it with like, bots or something like that. So like month is usually a pretty standard for a survey being open. That being said, we're trying to get at least 400 responses. So if we don't hit that, we're going to keep it open for another 2 weeks. After about a month to 6 weeks after the survey closes, we're going to have a brief preliminary report to the police commissioner. That's going to focus on the kind of the quantitative results. So a lot of like averages and seeing how the scores line up based on again different intersectional identities. But then after that, we're going to take maybe 3 to 4 months to comb through all the written open form responses so that we can dive deeper and make sure all those responses are properly incorporated.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask one more question. How can we help you?
Well, thank you very much. If you don't mind, next week we'll send a kit with some materials, again, flyers, posters, and boilerplate text. And if as long as you feel comfortable, please feel free to share that with any mailing list that you have, or also on social media. We appreciate any help with disseminating the survey out there. Even though we have great grassroots partners, not everyone is tied into their local LGBTQ center or network. So like having you as allies would be very, very helpful.
I think one thing that I draw from experience when I was on the board of AVP, and we were asking for funding from the city council, someone who in our development committee said, well, I reached out to the LGBT caucus and I said, well, that's only 6 people. There are 51 council seats. And we have LGBTQIA living in every community board area. So everyone has members of the community that really need to be counted on. So we're asking all community boards to give assistance where they can, reaching out to your members of your community boards to help themselves. So whatever assistance you feel you can provide us, we'll greatly take it, because again, it's never been done before. It's the first time it's actually happening. And hopefully it will be the beginning to what will be a reoccurrence to make sure that what's implemented within PD as far as change is actually holding. One of the things that you may not be aware of is everyone who goes through the police academy has to take an LGBTQIA competence training. Before they graduate, they must pass this class before they get their sidearm and their shield. So education, awareness, knowledge is vital, especially in the times we're living right now.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll open it to committee members. Any questions? Raise your hand. Let me open up my screen so I can see. Nobody, no questions. Okay. I think we're all curious to see the survey and then see questions from there and how we can help. See if we have anybody from the public. If there's anybody from the public, you can raise your hand.
Tiffany, I'm raising my hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry, you didn't
No,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry because I couldn't, I can't figure out how to raise my hand.
It's
in this, so
okay.
I'm
No
sorry.
problem. No
So
problem.
is
Go
this,
ahead.
can we post the survey through our committee on
Yeah,
CD
I'll speak with,
site?
that's what I'll do. I'll speak with the office when I do my follow-up after every meeting and see how or where we can potentially place that directly on our Manhattan CB5 website.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you guys for
No,
waiting
thank
out
you for
so
giving
long
us-
to. What's
Thank you
that?
for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Oh,
I mean,
oh,
it's
absolutely.
crucial that you know we exist, why we exist, what our responsibilities are, why we do what we do, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. Be
absolutely.
safe, stay
Thank you.
warm, and thank you for what you do for our city.
Thank you. We appreciate you
so
for
much.
saying that too.
quick question, if I may.
Sure, Mike. Go ahead.
Bruce, what is the name, the official name of your organization?
LGBTQIA, it's a long one, Advisory Committee to the Police Commissioner of the City of New York.
And it's on your email, Mike,
It
for
is
the
on our
agenda.
email, that is
It's on
correct.
your email for the agenda. Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you
just one
again,
last
Bruce
thing.
and Mike. Chris,
Thank
thank you
you.
so
Good
much.
night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Number 3 on our agenda, we'll go quick so we can all try to be done. Was anybody able to make any of the police precinct meetings for December or January?
Yes, I was.
Thanks, Mike. Which one did you go to? North, right? Or
Midtown
south?
North.
Yep.
Midtown North.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any info or just any feedback or anything?
They have a new commanding officer. Her name is Deputy Inspector Maggie Clamp. She's just been on the job. At that time was a week and a half, so now 2.5 weeks. Before that, she was the commanding officer at the 17th precinct, which is on the east side of Midtown, in the CB6. She was there for 2.5 years, and before that, she was in Brooklyn. She's been in the NYPD for 20 years. She brought up that her priorities are dealing with protests, dealing with e-bikes and reckless bike operations, and secondly, bikes on the sidewalk is a subsector of that. And when she was in the 17th precinct, they helped seize 500 mopeds while she was there for 2.5 years. So the people that were on the precinct council meeting were very happy to hear all of this about the bikes, because that's what they all have been complaining about for many years. And then there was also the crime statistics are down 23 to 28% on all of the categories, although she talked about getting recovering 2 firearms and 3 fake firearms, and problems with nightclubs on the other side of 8th Avenue and CB4. So that was what most of the meeting was about.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining that. One of the other things Maurice and I talked about is we would like to see if we can get the Q teams for each one of these precincts to come and speak at our meetings. Just give us a little talk over the next few months on what because each precinct and each area, as we know, has different problems and different issues and whatnot. So we're hoping to do that as well. Will?
Yeah, I attended the in-person meeting for precinct 13.
Thank you for doing that, by the way. Appreciate it. Okay, what did you, any take homes?
He's frozen
I
again.
did take some notes. Just let me know if I freeze. I don't know if my internet's working. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of discussion from the officers. It was mostly really angry constituents raising their hands and saying stuff, and the majority of that was based around homeless encampments and people that were really upset about those. The problem for us, I think, is that most of those are probably not in our district. They're closer, more on like 1st and 2nd Avenues, which is part of the precinct, but not part of our district.
Yeah.
But in any event, I mean, it's something that we need to focus on, and we have been focusing on. Personally, I don't think it's the police's job really to clear encampments. And even if it was, that doesn't really solve anything from my point of view. But people have legitimate concerns about.
Frozen.
Yeah, you froze again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Okay. you know, people have legitimate concerns and somebody has to handle those. And I think that's got to be the elected officials, in my opinion. But so it was, you know, it was sort of difficult to listen to people that were angry, people that were struggling, and sort of demanding that someone do something about this. But the police, you know, they're kind of like, we can only do so much. And then there was also talk about e-bikes and scaffolding, lighting. But yeah, that's my summary.
Okay, and I think, I mean, I could be wrong because I also need to learn more about the Q teams as well. We heard from when the Department of Health came, but as far as the like the police department side of it, I think that would be helpful so we know what is within their ability to do and how we can help in those different ways too. So that may be something that we can.
Can I
Someone
give
say
one
something.
update on that? too?
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, please. Thank you.
So we actually did a walkthrough on a very large homeless encampment in our district right before the snowstorm hit, with all the various agencies. And basically the update is that the NYPD and all the various agencies are waiting for policy from the new administration. So it's you know, they're documenting everything that exists, but there is no action being taken other than the standard sort of homeless outreach that happens through all the various service organizations that are subcontracted by the city. So we are expecting that guidance to come down in about a week or so. And so once that happens, I'll let the committee know. So.
Okay.
And
fabulous.
also just to update the committee that we are actually meeting with the Midtown North Q team on a constituent concern in the district, which revolves around the DOT's overnight delivery incentive program. So that we have a bunch of hotels in the upper 50s that are taking advantage of this incentive program, which allows for deliveries overnight to ease congestion during the day, but it's causing an enormous amount of issues for residents in the area. We have trucks idling for 4 or 5 hours doing their loading, unloading, and it's, you know, there are a surprising number of residents right around that area. So they're having a lot of problems. So we're meeting with them on Friday. And then the Midtown North Q team is coming to the office tomorrow just to do a meet and greet with the office staff. And I will ask them about coming to the committee the next month to present themselves to the committee.
Okay, that's wonderful. Is that meeting on Friday? Is that a public meeting? What is that meeting?
No,
Okay.
that's not. It's with the DOT rep, hotel reps, and the NYPD.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I don't think anybody got to the Midtown South, am I pretty sure? Okay, well, at least we got somewhere with that. And I appreciate it. I know I've been harping on this, but it's, you know, there's so many things about safety that we want to address and we just don't really know where to start and how to help. So hopefully we're getting a little bit of direction now with that. Anybody have anything else to say about the precincts? Mike?
What is a Q team?
Oh, it's their quality team. Q stands for quality. And they have, and Marisa can probably chime in because I actually don't know who. There's different members within that team. So it's social workers and a police.
Unfortunately, it's not social workers, but
right. It's not. Oh, it's not.
It is. It is the program with the NYPD that took over the neighborhood coordinating officers that existed, the NCOs. So they are essentially like the NCOs. They operate a little bit differently in that officers aren't assigned particular blocks. They have more officers on the Q teams than they had NCOs, but they're spread out sort of throughout the district so they can be more nimble, more flexible to respond to things.
Yeah. That's
Same
right. Thank
program,
you.
different name.
That's right. You're on.
I was just going to say, for myself or others who may be attending these meetings in the future, one thing that as a committee might be useful for us is to ask, it strikes me that there's obviously a base level of issues in all of these precincts and in these areas that will sort of always be there.
Mhm.
It's almost even more instructive for us to understand where the trend lines are. So like
Mhm.
what are we seeing more of than we have? What are we seeing less of than we have?
Mhm.
Because it's in those trends that we'll start seeing maybe where there's work for us to do. So it's just a thought that as we go forward, that asking them to sort of like, what are you seeing a lot of that you know,
Mhm.
this is, I've seen this happen on other boards too, is they're like, wow, well, actually, we're seeing a lot of this particular kind of crime or this particular, and that might be helpful for us moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And I have gone on the 3 different precinct sites a few different times, and I did right before the meeting. That's what I sent out. Just every month they do they release the crime PDF and then stats. So not that I want to have to rely on that, but it is, something we can briefly look over and kind of see some of those trends too if nobody is communicating that with us directly. So a bit of proactive approach with that too. But I do think those are great questions, and we're the community board, and we're part of the public when we attend these meetings, and we are there to ask questions too. And those are important, and it's important I think for them to even know that we're listening and paying attention, and we're trying to see if there's something that we can do and help with. So just our presence to be known to them, I think, can be helpful too. So all right, thanks, Huron. Did everybody get that? I'll send it out, that link from Chris and Bruce for the surveys. I'll send it out to you guys if you didn't get it on there. Okay, next month our meeting is on February 25th. I don't have our agendas yet. I'm hoping that we can discuss some shelters components, as well as maybe Midtown North Q team coming. I am meeting with the gentleman that spoke as the public earlier today, Mario, that Mike Kayback was asking who he is. He's part of Rose Hill Initiative, so he's part of the shelter program. So I'm actually meeting with him this week to see how we can help and get some dialogue going on with him as well. So maybe that's something that we can have on next month's meeting, just to look out for. Again, special interest, anybody has anything that they want to bring forward that we haven't been addressing, or always happy to take your texts or emails or whatever for us to look into. There is a topic that David Shapiro sent that we're going to dive into a little bit more. So won't go, just this is an overview. We're not talking about that necessarily yet, but the whole biometric analysis and Wegmans, that article came out about that. And there's a lot of, they're not in our district, they're in actually CB3. But Fairway, Macy's, Targets, I think some CVS's. I was researching today. There's been quite a few companies that are leaning toward having the biofacial recognition, which can either be an iris scan, a fingerprint, there's like voice. There's like 4 different ways, I believe, that they can capture that, but they're required to put it on their building to let you know that they are doing that. What I sent to you earlier when I sent the precinct notes out was also a resolution that SLAP did in February last year, 2024. It was about the liquor license for MSG. It wasn't MSG anything about this facial recognition and biometrics, but within it, there was a stipulation that we do not support that. And if you're supporting that, then we don't, in return, we don't support the licensing. You can read through that resolution because we will discuss that a little bit more. I actually have I know someone that was an attorney that got turned away, taking his son to a hockey game. I heard about that quite a while ago when it happened. But that's just another topic for us to potentially decide if we want to have a proactive approach and discuss it as a little bit more in depth as a committee, and potentially see if we want to write a letter to our local constituents on the matter. So when it does go to a higher level, we already have a stance. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that now.
Yeah, can I, Tiffany?
Sure.
Just so people like Madison Square Garden was targeting lawyers who were representing clients against them and were excluding them from access to MSG events. So
Mhm.
that's what that reso was about.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I
And the
mean,
person I know, yeah, but I can give the whole story. That it was a completely indirect correlation, and they still got kicked out. So it was a little bit, it's a little bit more than just if it's a me against you thing that happened there. Anybody else have any thoughts
Yeah.
if this is something that we should
Yeah.
like discuss as an actual agenda item?
Yeah, can I mention?
Sure. Oh, go ahead. Dave.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just wanted to, I wanted to talk to the group to see if this is something that is of interest to everybody here. I think, you know, for me personally, I would like to have, you know, signed permission for an organization to take my facial recognition or my personal data if I walk into a store. And so I think that it's a pretty interesting proactive thing that we could do here on this if there's enough support to kind of put a resolution together saying like, these are the things that we want, and we don't like that these businesses are doing this, and whatever we can do to push them to not do this is great. So that's just sort of my personal opinion. If there's other folks that believe kind of the same thing, great. If nobody thinks that this is something of interest, then, you know, we move on. So thanks.
Thanks, David. Can I just show of hands, just maybe that's easier if anybody wants to make this an agenda item and take a stance on it? You can just raise it in like this so I can see. Things we have like half of people. Okay. Okay. I'll do, I don't know if it will be next month just yet. I want to do a little bit more work on my own. I did some today, but I just want to make sure we are doing our due diligence in what we're asking and making sure we have all the info. So, okay. Any other new business?
Can I ask one,
Sure.
Tiffany? Sorry. So with the street vendor
Mhm.
presentation, like one thing that seemed pretty obvious to me is there's not enough. Like, I'm really worried about the saturation point of the city for additional, you know, vendors. And doesn't seem like there's been kind of, seems like a need for this, and maybe we could write something on that to advocate for a study or something. I don't know who would be the right agency to do it, but you know, like how many can we actually accommodate?
Yeah, I think that was interesting. Even the question from the public was, there's never been any studies. So how do we, you know, there's always studies, right? So I was kind of surprised there had never been a study. I'm not surprised that there's as many unlicensed as that there are, and there's actually more people on the street as vendors that are like even within the number that they're going to allow. So I don't think it'll be necessarily more because there's already more than that than there is. But I do believe that we need to maybe see how we can help make that a little bit more structured. So Melissa and I will talk about that and see how maybe we can bring that in, because I think we also we should always have both sides, and not necessarily at the same meeting, because we know that goes into a debate, and that's what I made sure we wanted to know that tonight was not about. It was about learning about street vendors, how it runs, what that organization does, and then the new legislation that just came out. So let us play with that a little bit and see how we can make the best forward movement. That's okay. Mike, get back.
Yeah, so if I understood, pertaining to this previous comment, if I understood him correctly, Mohammed, I think his name was, he said that a lot of the current wagons, food wagons and other licensed people on the street don't have the correct license. And by granting this other 2,000 a year for 5,000, a lot of those, or a portion of those, would be taken over by the people who are already out there. So the actual, if I understood him right, the actual increment wouldn't be 2,000 a year, it would be part of 2,000, but the other people who already were there are now taking some of that, if I understood him correctly. So
Yeah,
it would be
it
10,000 new.
No, it wouldn't be 10,000 new. It would be those that are already there, they can be legitimized and actually have licenses versus being out there illegally and whatnot. So, and you know, it could still spark other people that say they want to start doing it too and not be licensed and take that chance. But it's not adding, because there's already that many people out there. And yeah, that's what Mohammed was saying. But I think that what we were all kind of talking about was that there's never been a study about how many should be in what amount of area. And, you know, we do that with restaurants, we do that with liquor licenses, we do that with so many other things, even the cannabis task force now, right? There can only be so many in such amount of distance. So I think density surveying probably would be a good thing at some point to do this. It might not really mean much until they start rolling over with providing the permits, so more people become legal vendors and go from there. But yeah, you're on.
Yeah, not to litigate this now, but just to say, like, the map that they showed about siting restrictions had significant restrictions in our district. So I think the first step would be like, is this a problem in CV5? Now, in my time on the board, I have heard residents come to us with issues specifically in Columbus Circle. So I know that this has come up in reference to that area. I'm sure it's come up in other areas. So maybe it's like, to start with, is this a problem? And if so, where? And then we attack it that way. I think trying to like ask for citywide studies about density is maybe not the best use of our time, especially if much of our district is restricted from many kinds of street.
Well,
so
true. So we should look at what areas aren't restricted.
Well, are there
well,
issues? Again, in my time on the board, I have specifically heard residents speak to us about issues around Columbus Circle. So we can start there and just say, like, is this an issue there? And if so, what would be the issues? What would be the potential resolutions, et cetera? And then,
oh, sorry, you're on. Go ahead.
That's it.
Thanks. I think we can go to bids as well.
Yeah,
or bid reps too, because I know I think the garment district had some concerns around this. It would be helpful just to understand how others are feeling.
Yeah, that was
I think that'd be
what I was going
good
to say as well. Sorry.
Yeah. No, fine. That's totally what I was chiming in.
Yep. If we wanted to have someone come to give the opposite side of this story, then those were the people that were cited in the article that were being against it, was some of the bid reps.
Okay. Mike, hey, back.
Thank you. So I've been on the community board for a couple of years, and this issue of the sidewalk vendors used to come on the parks and public spaces. And I tell you, 8 years ago, there would have been no question. This would have been a no, no new people. So I'm kind of surprised that the city's turned around. I don't object to it. I don't have an opinion on it, except when it hurts me, or it helps me when I need a hot dog, and that's one right there. But other than that, I don't have any personal opinion. I'm willing to listen to what the city wants to try and go along with it. I'm open to that.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, just real quickly, I think maybe there's a restaurant association. I'm just concerned that they are what I sort of see as unfair competition in the sense that they don't pay rent, right? And so, you've got a lot of mom and pop kind of restaurants trying to survive out there, and they're paying rent, and they've got public facilities for they've got bathrooms that they've got cleanliness and health standards that are good for the city. And you've got, what I think is going to eventually happen is instead of having 5,000 legal food vendors, you're going to have now 20,000 legal food vendors and then another 40,000 illegal food vendors. And so it just strikes me that this is going to open the floodgates and create a lot of new challenges. And so when I do think, a study or some conversation about this is warranted. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they're talking about operating a business on what, $600 a year in fees. What is that? I mean, just saying.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, I think what I'm advocating for is that we talk about this issue, but we talk about it through the lens of our district, and let's stay pretty focused on that and not talk about policy, because this is a very different situation when you talk about different districts.
Yeah, can I speak on that too? Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand.
Sure. Yoden, 1 second. Let Kevin speak. He's had his
okay.
hand. 1 second. 1 second.
Apologies.
Kevin and then Yoden.
I just want to add to what I think I heard Joran say is to focus on our district. But if we're going to do a study at all, I'm really more interested in who their customers are than anything else. Because, it would be useful to know that if they're all out-of-towners or they're all commuters or, or are there people that are living in the community. I think that's an important thing to find out. And I think it speaks to the issue of competition because, I mean, I get like the argument in an academic way, but I'm not sure that I agree with it. But I think that should be a question.
Okay. All right, Yoden.
Yeah, so just speaking to the sighting rules, which are many, the big one is that the requirement of a 12-foot wide sidewalk is, immediately wipes out a lot of the city. Not so in our district, as we learned, I mean, we actually have like a lot of our sidewalks fit are 12-foot or wider. Because right now there are there's legislation proposed to make outdoor dining, like the rules are changing, it might be year round, and so I am concerned about the increase of the number of permits by the thousands every year, and I love street vendors. I have nothing against them. I'm just a little concerned that this is being unleashed without any planning consideration. And I think there are certain areas we know of, Huron and Columbus Circle, and so I do think we need to, it doesn't have to be like a comprehensive citywide survey, but for the areas of the city that are wider than 12 feet, which is mostly our district. I recommend that.
Okay. Well. Can't hear you.
Sorry. Just to be clear one more time, they're not increasing the amount of vendors. They're just increasing the amount of permits, and those would accrue to existing vendors. So I was trying to get clear if there's a way that this will incentivize new vendors to come on. And I didn't, what he said was relatively convincing, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But it's we're not necessarily increasing the amount of vendors. That might not increase at all.
Yeah, again, I don't know that we should work this out here, but I think what we're saying is the way forward is,
Mhm.
I think, first determine what the impact in our district is or would be, and then we can decide what if there are actions we want to take.
Well said. Thank you for getting my head out verbally. Same thing. Thank you. Yeah, well, I'll get back to everybody on that too. And Melissa and I will talk some more about it and talk the office and stuff as well. Any other new business? Okay, all right. And remember, next week goes back to in person. Next week's just exec anyways, but next week goes back to in person for the office. So don't forget, if anything changes on any meetings, you'll be notified. But as of that, next week goes back. Okay? Stay warm. I'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Over.